All right, well, I'm Joy Fergola, and welcome to Resilience, the Bridge to Navigate Change. And if you can't hear me, let me know. Raise your hand. I have this upturned a little bit since we want to make sure you can hear everything. All right, so a little bit about myself. I have a master's in psychology. I have been working in the field of giving presentations, leadership change, leadership development since probably the early 90s. Don't want to tell you my age, but it's been a while. So I've been doing workshops around the country, and I worked for GE for a long time. And then I came here and taught at UL for a year or so, and then started working at the iBank, where I work with a lot of grieving families who have said yes to donation. I work with coroners and funeral homes, so a lot of people who are in need of resilience and need of compassion and need of a way to share their story that gives a more positive outcome. So this is one of the things that I do. This is my passion. And so I hope you join me on this little journey for the next hour and a half as we share. I'd like this to be very interactive. So you're going to have an opportunity to share your story as well.
My name is Marlene Lucas. How are y'all doing? All right, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the field for over 50 years. Did a lot of things. Guess I'm going to do a lot more. I agreed to come today because I have a passion for sharing with people what they need to hear and helping people grow and lifting everybody up together. Because it's the only way we're going to make it. How do you change the world? One person at a time. Thank you. RJ, did you get her?
Awesome. So, that was our welcome. If you have questions, please feel free to answer or ask any questions. Our introductions, our housekeeping, we will have a break, probably a 5-minute or so break. We want to make sure we're out of here by 7:30. They lock the doors at 8, and I don't think they want us here at that time. Restrooms are across the hall, and of course, if you need to get up, you're welcome to. And then I'd like to tell you a little bit about our objectives. And so why are we looking at resilience now? Okay? And that's probably part of the housekeeping I should have mentioned. Please silence cell phones, which I just did on mine. Research suggests that resilience is less prevalent now than it has been in the past. That they are finding students with more anxiety, less able to complete tasks, less able to problem solve. And they are finding that even in the adult audience, they are finding that there are people who are coming in for work interviews and don't know what resilience means. They can't problem solve outside of the box. They have to kind of ask, well, what do you mean? Why do I need to be resilient? And so part of the reason we're seeing these changes over time, I believe, and some of the research shows, is that our change and our level of change is accelerating on a daily basis. It's accelerating because of the internet, because of social media, because of the way we share information, because of the models that we see on social work, on our social networks. So all of this contributes to the fact that people have to adjust more quickly. And unless they have a really strong basis to adjust and to decide where they stand, what they do, develop the confidence that they need to know that they can problem solve, they're not going to be very resilient, and they're not going to be very happy in this life. They're not going to be able to adjust to the changes. So we're going to look at this a little bit just to see what we're thinking of in terms of how this might look for others. And so resilience really is the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And that's the dictionary definition, okay? But I don't think resilience is always an easy process. Any thoughts on that? Anyone have a story of resilience that took you a lot of effort to get there, to adjust to the change? No? Yes? Y'all are so resilient. I love it. Okay. So I can tell you one, when I went to teach at UL, I knew I was doing it for a year, all right, because they were looking for a PhD. And when they told me they found someone, I was devastated. What was I going to do, right? I'd been down here. I was up from New York. I came all the way down to teach. Now I had family here. I had reasons for coming here. But what was I going to do? So I left and went home and cried for hours, right? Because even though I knew it was coming, it was a challenge. And there's a really good outcome from all of that. And I'll share as we go through the presentation a little bit about how I got to that point where I was able to walk on campus and have someone tell me, how can you look so happy when you don't know where you're going next? So it's a pretty awesome experience. But that's what happens when change can happen and how you can make it happen for yourself. But it's not always easy. And actually what I find is that even though, I'm looking at this, even though the dictionary says it's easy, it's not. And it says it's about surviving, about doing well in class, about being the best self you can be, but I think it's also about thriving, about being more than just surviving, about being happy, about being able to live your life with vigor and passion, okay? To be able to say that, oh my God, this life is just gorgeous and this is where I want to be. So basically what I want to remember is, have you ever heard the poem Still I Rise by Maya Angelou? Okay. It's an amazing poem, and she talks about her life and how she has been able to overcome, and no matter what anyone does to her, she is going to rise. The thing that really got me is that as she introduces this poem, this is what she says. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and as she flaunts herself, some style, okay? That is what resilience really is. That is a bridge, not only to change, but to living a joyful life and to engaging in life in a very positive way. So change can be instantaneous, it can be tragedy, it can be built over time, it can be global. Look at all of the different ways that things change just in our lifetime, sometimes just in a day. Look at the storm that was supposed to hit here and then didn't and moved east. Luckily for us, not so lucky for others. So there's still all of this instantaneous change, things that you can't possibly be ready for. The death of a child, something totally unexpected, right? Something that builds over time, a loved one that you're taking care of. And all of a sudden, even though you think you know, and you're ready for their loss, when it happens, you're not ready, and it is a major change. The global changes that we see, the wars that are going on, the economy that's happening, all of this, personal changes. You've all had personal changes in your life. Marriage, divorce, babies, new jobs, new relationships, all kinds of wonderful things. Even if they're good, it's change, and it takes some time to adjust. Work can be difficult, politics can be difficult, relationships, all different levels of relationships, and even spiritual. Because we change, we grow, we learn, we adjust, we hope. Does anyone have anything that they want to add to this? Y'all are too quiet. You know I'm going to have you talking at some point here. Okay. So change can be positive, and it can also be negative, right? So like I just said, a new job can be great. It's also stressful, can also be a negative at some point. Marriage can be a major change, birth of a child. But if you're resilient the outcome of every negative change can be positive. It may not be the whole outcome, and it may not be what you first thought it was going to be. And that's the wonderful thing about resilience. It sometimes leads you on paths and across bridges that you never knew existed. And that is the part that I find so appealing, that if you can open to the possibility of all of these possible changes, sometimes things we don't even imagine as the outcome of a change, whether it's negative or positive, you've just opened yourself to a whole new world. Can tell I'm passionate about this? Okay. So actually, resilience is also a dynamic process. It changes over time. So what might be helpful to a child to develop their confidence, to be able to be supported by a parent, to be able to have a safe place and a safe environment to learn new things? As that child gets older, if the parent doesn't let go, then the dynamic changes, right? So if the parent doesn't give additional, I want to say support, but support in terms of letting go, of letting the child make decisions, of letting them fail, which we find doesn't happen very often anymore, right? That a lot of times parents are doing everything they can possibly do so their child doesn't fail at anything. Right? That is not really helpful in developing resilience, because you want to be able to fail at the little things to build your confidence so that as you grow older, you have developed a repertoire of skills and mindset that actually help you become resilient. So tonight, we were going to have two speakers, and now we have one. So Reese Gilmore, who is not available today because of some of the challenges that she met yesterday with the storm. She did, however, send me a document that I can read in her place. So this is an example of being resilient, right? Okay, we're going with the flow, we're making it work, and we're still creating the opportunity for her to share and for you to understand a little bit about Reese's story. So, and I'm reading it in her voice, so she's talking to me as well as you. And she is saying, "Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Gilmore, and I'm sorry that I can't be here in person. Thank you, Joy, for being willing to share my story. Hopefully, it can offer a lighted pathway for others who are struggling with their place in life. I am the founder of the Rescue Group, and that's spelled RESCYOU. Okay. It's a local nonprofit here in Acadiana that assists families when they suffer the loss of a child between the ages of 1 year old up to 18 years old. And we provide financial aid for end-of-life expenses, clinical grief counseling, peer-to-peer support, and we offer a child the program to assist grieving siblings. Today, I want to share my journey of resilience, patience, and hope. The journey stems from a profound personal loss, the death of my 2-year-old son, Clint, in 2008, who passed away by drowning in our front pond. I never imagined that I would be able to survive the death of my precious 2-year-old little boy. Losing Clint was a heart-wrenching experience that tested my entire being. It shook me to the core. The pain felt insurmountable, and for years, I searched for meaning in my grief. It took time, but I learned that resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about transforming that pain into purpose. It took 13 long years to bring the rescue group to life. And during this time, I often questioned whether I could ever channel my grief into something meaningful. However, I realized that God's timing is perfect. Each setback, each delay was not a dilution of Clint's story, but rather a preparation for the path ahead. I was placed in front of the right people at just the right time. It started when you, Joy, And I was with Southern Eye Bank because Clint was an eye donor upon his death. And Reese actually met one of his recipients at one of our celebrations of life. Okay, so we kind of organized all of that. And of course, LOPA, which is the Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency, gave me the opportunity to share Clint's story on being a donor and educate our community on the importance of becoming an organ and tissue donor. That work led me to becoming the program director of Maddie's Footprints, where for 6 years I helped families who suffered the loss of a miscarriage or an infant death. I know that my love for working with the bereaved was leading me to expand the age of help, and that is when we opened the rescue group in 2021, and now we serve 10 parishes when a family suffers the loss of a child. As I work with bereaved families, I discovered the healing power of community and support. Helping others navigate their grief became a source of strength for me. This work has not only honored Clint's memory, but has also allowed me to find a purpose in my pain. Every step of this journey has been filled with invaluable lessons. I've learned about sympathy, empathy, the importance of connection, and how to harness determination in the face of adversity. The contacts I've made, the families I've helped, and the stories I've heard have enriched my life in ways I never could have imagined. In closing, I want to emphasize that resilience and patience are powerful allies in our journeys, and especially through grief and healing. The creation of Rescue Group is not just about my story. It's about the collective strength that we find in timing. You see, timing was everything in my case. I needed time to grow. I needed time to heal. I needed time to find community. I needed time to make contacts, and I needed time to prepare. But more than anything, I needed time to listen to my heart, and it's hard to hear what a broken heart is trying to say. I needed time to allow hope to set in, and I needed hope to find my direction. The one thing that every bereaved parent fears the most is that the world will forget who their precious children are. The myth tells us that there is a timeline that we must do all this in. We think we need to run out there and carry out their legacy right away, that we are up against a time clock to transform our grief. That's a lie. If I had run before I was ready, I would have tuckered out. I would have lost steam along the way. I would have been too fragile and too weak to withstand the race, and I would have missed the scenic beauty because of taking shortcuts, and I would have missed the lessons and all the no's. I might have even believed those that said I couldn't do it or it couldn't be done. So I'm thankful for taking the long road to get here. The journey isn't and wasn't easy, and parts have been very scary, but I can say that the scenery from where I am standing now is a landscape full of majestic color and beauty, and it is good to see the world in full color again. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey with you today. And you can learn more about the Rescue Group on our website or by following us on social media platforms. So Reese is a very powerful speaker, and I'm sorry she couldn't be here. Me reading her story isn't quite the same as her standing here and telling you what her journey was like. But we've all had these journeys, and maybe not specific, maybe not the exact journey that Reese had. But we've all had loss, we've all had grief, and we all know what that journey looks like. The question becomes, what do we do while we're in that journey? And now we have talked a little bit about the personal grief that's made it to a community connection. And now we're going to hear from Miss Angela Morrison, who's going to share a little bit about what she's done in the community and the whole community of resilience.
Thank you, Joy. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I hope you can hear me okay. Is this okay if I just talk?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So yes, I'm Angela Morris. I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Director of Engagement for Hospice of Acadiana. But to get to this place, hey Patsy, and I see some friends in the audience and some of my coworkers are here tonight too. But I've gotten to this place where I am at Hospice of Acadiana because of probably that word resilience. and having the opportunity to have a front row seat, and many times to communities and organizations and with groups who had to show and work through certain things. Hey, Cheryl, and it's so good to see some of the faces I haven't seen in a long time. But so to get to this place, I've had an opportunity to have a really good front row seat to some really strong, resilient communities and groups. So I want to just tell you a few stories about some of that and how we actually were able to get from one place to the next because we were resilient. And I want to start 19 years ago. I was the president of the Junior League of Lafayette. And when you think about Junior League of Lafayette, you think about a certain sector of the community. First of all, even before 19 years ago, when I first joined the Junior League 25 years ago, it was probably not an easy decision that I made because at the time, people who were members of Junior League of Lafayette did not necessarily look like me. They were not of modest income. They had different types of social circles. But guess what? They invited me in. I said, okay, this is an opportunity. I was working for United Way of Acadiana at the time. I was a volunteer center director. So, okay, I'm gonna do this because there are a lot of women who I was affiliated with because of my work. So maybe I could expand my social circle. 5 years later, after joining the Junior League, they made me president. My year as president, there was a disturbance in the Gulf called Katrina. Katrina came through New Orleans, and then Rita, right behind it, came through our area. And as a result of those two hurricanes back to back, our neighbors to the east needed to come to our area.
Right.
Guess where the shelter was? The Cajun Dome.
Right.
What was the signature fundraiser for the Junior League of Lafayette? Tinsel and Treasures. And that's coming up in a couple of weeks, so look for tickets if you're interested. But being the first Black president of the Junior League, and then having to pivot the major fundraiser in the same year was a pretty significant event. Resilience, I tell you, I had been in the league for 5 years at that point and felt good about my tenure thus far. But I will tell anyone and everyone, if you want to volunteer, if you want to learn to be a great volunteer, it's a good path to take. Because initially, of course, we were very disappointed about not being able to have our signature fundraiser and all the things that went along with it. I walked in the Albertsons one evening, and there was a family in front of me. They were obviously evacuees, and because they were trying to get a few things. And there was another couple behind me, and people that were from here, we were very fearful of people that we didn't know, that didn't look like us, didn't have the same things that we had. They were fearful, so they were saying, oh, those evacuees, those refugees, these da-da-da-da-da. And then when I got to the Junior League office, and people were like so upset because we couldn't have our tinsel and treasures and all the things we were accustomed to. Our volunteers showed up at the Cajun Dome. We saw the families living on cots, trying to just get their next meal, making sure that they could find their loved ones. Guess what the Junior League women did? They formed a little army. And not because the same volunteers that were supposed to show up for Tinsel and Treasures to do all the things for Tinsel and Treasures, they decided to take those hours and devote it to the evacuees that were in the Cajun Dome. And we were able to begin to help families not only get their next meal, but then to have a better experience having to live in the Cajun Dome. Advance a few years later, working at United Way in 2010. Imagine going to bed at night and you're resting in Rain, Louisiana. And you're resting, you have, we don't have tornadoes in this area. We had never heard of that. Cheryl had, because she's from the Midwest, so she knows what that's like. But then you're laying in your bed, and suddenly the wind just in Rayne, Louisiana, and probably the poorest neighborhood in Rayne, Louisiana. A tornado went through, devastated families' homes and their lives. For 2 years, I worked with families in Rayne, Louisiana through my job at United Way of Acadiana. And we were able to help so many families rebuild. Families that were living in homes they could not claim with insurance companies because guess what? They didn't own the homes. They were living in family homes that that probably lots and lots of other people, their names were on the deed, or there was no succession. There was so much that needed to be done. But that community came together, the mayor, Mr. Petron. We came together, we did all of the work, people volunteered, they raised money, they had dinners, they did all the things. You talk about resilience. Going to bed one night, the next morning, you have nothing. And still being able to come out of that and rebuild and have a home. Few years later, and Bruce knows this story, we work for the Lafayette Parish school system, and we were trying to do things as a community to help, to make sure that every child had high quality education. Again, I had an opportunity to have a front row seat because I saw what I thought was the potential of some great opportunities for Lafayette Parish school system and the children and the 30,000 children that we were serving and all the families. Not so easy. Politics, you talked about that being a big factor. Politics interweaved itself into that. My boss got fired, and once he got fired, my job was eliminated. I'd been working 2.5 years. Talk about wake up and say, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow for a paycheck? Well, that's okay. All of those experiences, all of those opportunities led me right back to what I knew best, and that is to continue to serve the community. Worked with other nonprofits, went back to United Way, worked with the university, my alma mater, had a chance to do that. But then I went back to United Way because of the desire to continue to help and to continue to serve those that could not serve themselves. 2 years ago, 2021, of course, before that, COVID, we all have a COVID story, right? And if you're all sitting here today with smiles on your faces, that means you're very resilient because we had to pivot, do things differently. But during that time, my 95-year-old mother, who had been driving herself to church every day in 2020, could no longer do that. Her routine was interrupted. Her routine was all of those things. She had to change. She had to change. I had to change because I had to help her change. That was probably the end of all of her high quality of life. She started to sit in her chair and do nothing, depression, all of those things set in. I am so grateful that because of all the things I've had an opportunity to do, one of the things that I had been invited to do was to sit on the board of the Hospice of Acadiana Foundation with Casey, and so I was sitting on that board, and I knew all the things that Hospice of Acadiana did. So when I needed somebody to support me, hospice had just instituted palliative care. My mother was one of the very first patients that they were able to assist, even if it was just over the phone. Elaine came to my mother's home and helped us. Again, having to pivot, having to change our lifestyle, having to change the way we did things, my mother having to change. She lived 2 more years. So in 2021, she did, she moved on, she transitioned on. But in 2023, when God asked me, well, I'm a strong believer in God. And when God said to me, Angela, there's another opportunity for you. And they called me from Hospice of Acadiana and asked me if I would join the team and tell the story of hospice. Another opportunity to stand in front of people just like you to tell the story of resilience and how important it is that we be able to take the situation that we have, look at the gifts that those situations give to us, and then we build there, and we start there, and we continue to build there. So I applaud all of you as social workers and counselors and all the good things that you do every day to help people who are struggling with change, whether it's positive or negative, and being able to see where they can come out on the other side. But with that, Joy, is that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Do y'all have any questions for me? Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. So this ties everything together to a degree, right? So we've had the personal journey of Reese, who became more in tune with her community. And we have the community's journey from Angela, who then turned around and used it as a more personal basis. And so it takes both times. It takes both times. Does anyone from the audience have a story to share? You know, I told you I was going to ask you all this. So hopefully you've been thinking. Share a resilience story. It doesn't have to be major. I know y'all had to be resilient. Like she said, you're sitting here with smiles on your face. Come on. I can't believe. You all are just too quiet. Are you hungry? Is that part of it? All right. So I'll do a couple more slides and then we'll take a break in about 10 minutes. So that'll get us almost halfway through where we need to be. So resilience usually produces an actionable outcome. But resilience can also be mental, emotional, spiritual, so it can be internal as well. And so there may be things that you are noticing in someone, the challenges that they're facing, and you don't know how they can do it, right? Because if you were in their position, you're not sure you would. And yet, they're able to do that, and why is that? Because they're resilient. Because they have found a balance, because they have found a way of looking at this in terms of positive adaptation, of making this something positive and finding the one good thing, because they know themselves well enough to know that they can do this without challenging their belief system, and it's actually based on their belief system. Does any of that make sense? So you can have someone who, so I'm going to tell you I'm resilient. How many of you here are resilient? Come on. I want to see every hand. You're all resilient, right? Well, 20-something years ago, my son had a snowmobile accident and had a very serious brain injury. And we have been dealing with the outcome of that for 20-something years. And a lot of challenges along the way. And what has it required? I have not had to move. I have not had to do a lot of things that I thought I might have to take care of him. He's actually doing extremely well right now. But mentally, I had to change my perception. I had to realize that it was my choice to take care of him, that it wasn't just a duty. It was my choice, which changed my attitude, right? Because if it's your choice, how can you complain, right? Makes it a lot easier. There's a lot of things like that in our lives that we don't think about in terms of being resilient, but are truly resilient. Someone who feels they have lost their faith and then manages to find it again, however it may appear. It's resiliency, and they're being resilient. They're not giving up, they're not sitting down, they're not saying, oh, poor me. They're not being a victim. They're taking an active stance, even if it's internal. Make sense? Okay. So basically, you also need to be self-aware, right? You have to know yourself, at least to a degree, so that you know your strengths. Tell me one strength you have. I'm going to call on someone if someone doesn't answer. Tell me one strength you have.
I'm resilient.
All right, wise guy.
I'm persistent.
Okay, what else? Tell me something else positive.
Have a good sense of humor.
Okay,
Adaptable.
okay. We all have strengths. How often do we think about our strengths?
Every day.
If you're resilient, right? You think about your strengths every day. How much more often do we think about the things that we don't do well? Or what we perceive as our challenges? How often? A lot more often. The world gives us a negative point of view on a constant basis. And so trying to change that point of view requires that you be self-aware and that you know what your strengths are. Because if you don't know, it's too easy to be reactive. And if you don't sit and talk with, I say talk, I talk to myself. I don't know, Bill. I talk to myself. And I tell myself, you chose this. So it's easy not to get upset. Right? You chose this. I'm thankful that I chose this because the outcome has been beyond anything I could expect. And even if it hadn't been, it would have been a whole different journey, and it would still have been something to be grateful for. But you don't want to simply react. So we want to choose what we do. And then the balance. You know, we hear a lot about balance, right? Balance in the work-life force, right? You balance with work versus balance with life. There's a lot of things out there now. Well, guess what? There's internal balance as well. Okay? Are you living in fear? Are you living in love? Are you able to see both? Right? And choose where you want to be? Right? Because that's balance. Nobody's going to go through life tiptoeing through the tulips. They're just not. However, nobody wants to go through life dragging a bag of garbage behind them either. Right? So you want to find that balance. There are going to be times when that garbage gets kind of heavy, but then you're going to figure out a way to let it go so that you can go tiptoe through the tulips. Really would like to do someday. All right, and then there's also positive adaptation. And that's really just the process of adjusting to all the changes. All right, that's looking at the one positive thing that will help you focus and that will enhance your functioning and your well-being. Because that's what this is all about. Resilience is about being able to manage the changes in this world that are manageable, because not everything is. And so it isn't that we can manage the change, we can only manage our response. And the resilience becomes our focus. And it becomes the way that we meet most of life when you've had a little bit of practice. And the practice starts when you're babies, believe it or not. So I'm going to ask you this, and we'll take a break after this one. What do y'all see on this picture? Now, I don't know how many of you have ever seen this one before. Okay. So
Great.
tell me, how many of you see someone moving up, climbing up? How many of you see someone holding on? And how many of you see someone climbing down or sliding down? Oh, I'm impressed. You're all positive people. You're either hanging on or moving up. I love it. Okay, so basically what we're going to lead into in our next part is that perception and how you see the world has a major change and a major influence on how you see it and how you respond. So change has a considerable psychological impact on the human mind. Okay, to the fearful, it's threatening, because it means that things may get worse, which I know a few people like that, okay? They really do. It's like, yeah, things are, as my ex used to say, things are in the dumpster. Okay? Or to the hopeful, it's encouraging because things may get better. Right? And then to the positive, to those with confidence, it's inspiring. Oops, sorry. I just want this a little bit further. It's inspiring because it's an opportunity to change. It's an opportunity to learn something new. It's an opportunity to do something different than what you've done. It's an opportunity to explore. Okay? And from that, it looks like most of you are on your way to exploring new worlds. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about feelings, because there's always feelings associated with resilience, right? Anything we do, there's feelings that are associated with it, whether you're happy, sad, depressed. So, what did we hear in all of in the two different stories? We heard depression, yes? And if you did not hear it from the community one, then it was the people that she was interacting with who were depressed because they'd lost everything. And they not only had they lost everything, they were relocated where they knew no one. All right, so there's all of that. But you also heard hope and determination. Somebody really wanting to make a difference, somebody really wanting to find the way out and be willing to try different ways of doing it. How about courage? What about, does it take courage to be resilient?
Yes.
Tell me why.
Because
Why does it take courage?
it pushes you outside of your boundaries to
Yep.
recover.
That's right.
You have to start with a new way of thinking because the old way you were thinking got you into the position you were in.
Okay.
So it takes courage to create,
To do something different.
right?
Right. Okay. Anyone else? I mean, there's ways of doing things positively too that take courage. So could I tell you all that I used to hate to speak in public? And that when I read the prayer at my brother's wedding, I almost passed out because I couldn't breathe. And then I had an opportunity to go to work for GE, working with leaders, executives, and it paid really well, and I got to travel.
That sounds great.
I'm like, I can do it. Well, the first couple of ones were like, my little voice was really hard because nobody wanted to hear, especially a big old white male leader did not want to hear a little girl saying something like this. So I learned to speak up, right? And I totally loved it. Totally loved it. Something brand new I've never tried before, was scared to death the first couple of times I did it, and I did it anyway, and that was courage. And I know that I'm courageous. Like a lion, right? Walk around like a lion, right? Or a lioness. It's fun. It's fun to try new things if you can get past the fear. And actually courage is doing it even if you're afraid. All right? Because we're almost never totally without fear. Empowerment. What does that mean? Empowerment. It is part of what we've heard in their stories was their willingness not only to do something, but to help others do it. All right? To help others be courageous, to help others change. What do y'all do in your everyday life? How many of you here are social workers, LPCs? What do you do every day? Yes, you empower people, right? If you're a teacher, or anyone here a teacher? Yeah. What else? What other occupation is here?
Nurse, substance abuse counselors.
Okay.
I do recruiting, but along with that, a lot of career coaching.
See, so we're all empowering people. That's what we do. And that's part of being a community. It's part of being a successful community. It's part of being a thriving community. Right? It's by helping others. And by helping others, we help ourselves. So I talk a little bit about my son. Well, I changed a lot too. You know, as he struggled for a long time. And wow, I'm not quite the same person I was 20 years ago. I say thanks a lot. But anyway, so empowerment and then confidence. And we talked a little bit earlier about parents not wanting their children to fail. Where do you think confidence comes from?
Failing and getting back up.
Learning to get back up. Learning to get back up. And one of the things, so think about this. How many of you, now I'm going to tell my age here because, how many of you have ever roller skated?
Oh, you're old.
See, I know, I told you. All right, so you roller skated, right? Well, when I was about 8, I'm not telling you when that was, I lived in upstate New York. In upstate New York, and we lived on a hill. So you don't have hills here. We had hills in upstate New York. And I wanted to go down that hill on my roller skates. And I would stand up there at the very top of the hill, and I had my skates on, and I'd look at that hill, and I'd look at that hill, and I'd go to the side on the grass. And I did that about 4 or 5 times, and then one day I just got up there and said, I can do it. And I spread my arms out, and I flew down the hill on my roller skates, and I didn't go on the grass, and I didn't fall. But that's confidence. Because you knew eventually you could do it. And I knew I could do it because I'd failed other times. How many times did I step on the grass? A lot. Okay. So confidence, but you can't be resilient unless you have confidence. You have to know at some level you're going to be able to gather something out of that experience that's positive. May not be what you expect, but it is something that you have to be able to gather. So out of all of those stories, these are a common thread. But now there's also attributes. And so an attribute is a character trait or a physical characteristic. Something like honesty, integrity, flexibility. We're going back to confidence again because it's not only a feeling, but it's an attribute. Optimism, right? Pretty hard to be resilient if you're a pessimist. Now people do it, but it's a lot harder. You look for the good, look at self-efficacy so you know your value. And that gets harder sometimes with all the changes that go on in this world. To know your value and to know yourself. Acceptance, not only of your strengths, but of your weaknesses, right? And responsibility, knowing that you are responsible for your behavior and your response to the circumstances. Solution-oriented. Problem solvers. How many of you here are problem solvers? Oh, yes. See, most of us are. And most people would be if they had the opportunity. Okay? Because people get tired of being told what to do. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to live their life, right? Think of the teens who rebel. They don't want to be told what to do. They're not quite ready to solve their own problems, but you can give them a basis for it, right? You can give them some of the attributes, some of the characteristics, some of the values that will give them a strong basis for making decisions. And then this is one of the things that we've talked about both with Angela and with Reese, was the connections that they made. And connections and support are very, very important for being resilient. Okay. Because if you're standing alone, you're not really sure if you're going to be able to do what you think you need to do. But sometimes it only takes one word, one person, one smile. And I know that it gets overworked in social media, but sometimes it really does only take one person to be nice, to help you see, oh, and take a breath. Because when we're afraid, we're holding our breath. Yes? So in order to be able to breathe, you have to let go. And letting go means letting go of that fear. So the connections are really important in terms of how to make change sustainable. And you know, there's a lot of talk right now, not only about resilience for people, but there's actually books out on resilient thinking for systems and for communities and for places like the Everglades, where they're looking at the impact of all the changes of growth, because they didn't look at those impacts long term. And now they're trying to figure out how to change it and make it sustainable for everyone, which includes the wildlife. Right? So there's a whole new process of resilient thinking, which I think is just amazing. I love the idea of it. And then finally, there's gratitude. So, gratitude. I love to be able to talk about gratitude. Does it make any of you smile? Yes, it should. Okay, so.
But I would add love to that list, because I heard a lot of love in both of those stories.
You're right. And I don't think you can have gratitude without love. Agreed?
Right.
And that's a really good point. Thank you. Yeah. How did I leave that out? Okay. So, some research shows that there are 5 core values that determine success: honesty, enthusiasm, hard work, confidence, and perseverance. Those 5, and I'm going to say them again if you're taking notes. Honesty, enthusiasm, hard work, confidence, and perseverance. And that's a lot of what the research is showing, that people who are resilient, those are the qualities that the values that underlie their behavior. I don't know, have any of you ever read the book Unbroken?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my favorite books. If you haven't read it, it is by, I'm going to tell you her name, Laura Hillenbrand. And it is the story of Louis Zamperini. I cannot say that. And I'm Italian. Say it. Zamperini. And he was a very determined young man who was a runner. And it talks a little bit about his running, and he ended up in World War II, shipwrecked, captured, prisoner of war, escaped, went back, and became a runner again. Even after being physically decimated by being a prisoner of war and being lost at sea. The story is amazing, and it talks a lot about that internal resilience we talked about a little bit ago, about the spirituality, right? Think of how you're alone in the ocean, alone as a prisoner of war being tortured. So all of that was a lot about the internal piece, but it's also about his joy at being alive. Because if he didn't have that, I don't think he could have survived all that he went through. So he was probably the most extreme example of resilience that I can think of. Well, actually, no, there's a couple of others. From the Holocaust, right? There are writers, there are people who have come through and who have changed psychology because of the way that they experience the world and that particular experience for them. So all of this says that if you are aware of yourself, if you are aware of the qualities that comprise resilience, if you are willing to explore who you are and the experiences in your life and imagine a different outcome and then work towards that outcome, however you may do it, step by step, carrying your journey, carrying your sadness, right? Your grief, but knowing that it's only part of the journey, that there's still more, and there's still something positive out there. And there's still something positive in terms of your particular journey. And so we want to talk a little bit about rekindling resilience. Now, why do I say rekindle? So how many of you are resilient? Of course. I want to see all the hands. Yes, I know you're all resilient. Well, so why do I say rekindle though? Because there are some people who don't think they're resilient. who don't know what the word even means. Go back to my friend Ann, who works in HR in New York, and she has young people coming to her who can't even give her one example of when they thought outside of the box. Okay, so they're not there. They don't even know the word. How do you know? Well, you know what? We are hardwired to thrive. When we are born, we are hardwired to thrive, not just survive. Okay? And so I'd like you to think of a baby. Yes? Think of a baby and a baby learning to walk. How often do they fall? It's a process. How often do they fall? Now, their bodies are such that they're not going to really get hurt, right? Unlike ours. However, when they do walk, what's the expression on their face? They're joyful. They laugh. All right? And they do this automatically. It is part of us. Resilience is part of us. We would not be where we are today without that quality. But we forget it. And how do we forget it? We forget it because we are constantly bombarded with all of these negative things that people tell us about in the news. Right? Not that they're not there, but there's no balance. Remember we talked about balance? So there's no balance. So how can you remember that you're hardwired for this? When there's not a whole lot of, what do I want to say? There's not a whole lot of anything out there showing you that really is part of who you are, okay? You know, think of all those pictures you see of a flower growing through a crack in the sidewalk. I mean, you know, those are common everywhere, right? How many of you garden? Yeah. How many of you know how quickly the weeds take over a garden? Yes. The inborn ability and desire to thrive and to grow, okay? And this is how we find our bridge to resilience. How do we actually find our ability to change? How do we do that? And one of the things that I find, and I'm going to share that last story with you, is all of this. You know, we have skill sets that we develop over time, like a baby learning to walk. First they crawl, right? Then is it threatening? Is it hopeful? Is it inspiring? Where are we? Because we don't always look at something as hopeful, right? Sometimes we're barely hanging on. But only sometimes. It's not the whole story. So we need our ability to communicate. And we need someone to communicate to, right? Whether it's a higher force, higher person, higher source, whether it is a person, whatever it may be, but we need someone. We need the support, we need the connections, and we need to know that we are responsible for our own behavior. Whether it's a reaction or a response, and we get to choose that, whether we're reacting or responding. And then acceptance of where we are, because you know that gratitude prayer, Lord help me, yeah? There are things we can't change. And there are some things we probably shouldn't change. What do we want to do, right? So, it's acceptance. And then the last one is gratitude. It's an attitude of appreciation towards the good things in your life. And even in the worst of times, there's good things in your life. So when my son was in the hospital, he was in ICU in a coma for 2 weeks. The good thing was that there was a whole waiting room full of people waiting to see him and pray for him. That was good. Right? In all the rest of that, because the doctors told us he wouldn't live. And if he did, he was going to be in a hospital for the rest of his life. Well, if you met him now, you would never know that he had a brain tumor. So it was our miracle. But all those people that were waiting were praying. And he was in a trauma center. And I mean, there's a whole list of things that contributed to his well-being, all right? But the gratitude piece. When I told you that I taught at UL, and then they found the PhD, and I went home and cried. Because not only was I working at UL, I was living in a assisted, well, like a faculty apartment, which meant then I didn't have a place to live either. So, no job, no place to live. So I went home, I sat there and I cried. And I took a deep breath and I made a list of everything I was grateful for. And I read it. It wasn't very long. To start anyway. I read it and I cried some more. So I wrote it and I read it again. Now I went home around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, okay? And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was still reading my list and crying. But when I started looking at that list and all of the things I was grateful for, just from that year, being here in Louisiana, reunited with friends, my daughter was here with her family, I got an opportunity to do things I never would have done. I found out how much I loved teaching. I loved doing workshops with the different executives and all of that, but teaching was a whole different story. I loved it. And I realized I was going to be okay. I had no clue how. I had no clue how. But I was truly grateful, and not just thinking grateful, but I was feeling grateful. And that's the piece. You have to feel it to change your thoughts because of our mind-body connection, right? So when you think particular thoughts, if you think negative thoughts, your brain makes a particular chemical. When you think positive thoughts, your brain makes a different chemical. Research, all kinds of research out there about that. When you feel a particular way, your brain thinks a particular way. So if you can make yourself feel happy, your brain's going to think happy thoughts. All right, that's the way it works. And if you are sad and your stomach hurts because you're sad, your brain's going to think sad thoughts. And it's going to produce the chemicals that create more sad thoughts. So it's this whole cycle. Well, when you're grateful and you're in love, because that's where you are, you're in your heart, you're grateful, and I mean feeling this gratitude, your brain changes. The brain changes, the chemicals change. And you can actually train your brain to do that. So the more you do it, you create new neural pathways that like that particular chemical. And so the next time something negative happens, you can be aware. Which do I choose? So we go back to our responsibility for our behavior, right? We choose to respond rather than react. There's a lot of really positive research out there about feeling and the chemicals in your brain and thoughts. So it's this whole big cycle. And so I got to the point where I got up the next morning and I said, I have no clue what's happening, but I'm okay. And I walked to class, and one of the professors was like, how can you do that? You walk around campus like you're happy. I'm like, I am, but you don't know where you're going. Because of course the whole department knew I was teaching psychology, everybody knew everything. No, I don't. It's okay. I won't starve. I have family, right? I mean, they have to take me in, right? So anyway, but that is gratitude, and it can change everything. And when you start looking and you think about Reese's story, and when Reese starts thinking about doing something positive in terms of honoring her son, that was gratitude for her son's life. Gratitude that she had had him for just those 2 years. And when you heard Angela's story, and her gratitude for where she was in life, with her ability to be able to help others. Big, big difference in how we respond. So I have about 2 more minutes, and this is the other piece here. Gratitude actually does reduce stress and anxiety. Think of my story. It worked. I have no idea how. And in fact, I went to Italy with no money. I don't know. And my brother laughs at me because I do these things. It works. But it's because I'm grateful and I have the energy, I guess, this positive energy most of the time. Not always. None of us are there. But I'm like, yeah, this is my plan. And I'm taking one step at a time, and I'm going to do this. I don't know really how, but it'll work. And it does. So my first step is I got my passport. You know, I did step by step. Found a cousin of mine who wanted to go to Italy. Found a tour that was really inexpensive. You know, it works. But the gratitude is because it changes your energy. And you know, if like energy attracts, right? And so like energy attracts. So if you're negative and you're, I mean, think of it. Walk into a room. Can you tell the energy of the room? Absolutely. Okay, you can tell if someone's happy or sad or grieving. You can tell. So energy attracts energy. Right? And so think about that and feel it, because that's the whole piece of it, is feeling it. And then, in terms of fostering resilience, you can model it. You can share your stories. You can be grateful. And you can focus on one positive thing out of all the negatives. It might take you some time to find it. It took Reese, she told us that she took a year. And she told us she took a pause for a year and did nothing when her son died. Okay. It only took me an afternoon, but I only had lost a job. You know. So, but you can do that. You can find the one good thing, and it takes time. And then you can be grateful, but you can also share your stories. And then Marlene has a toolbox that she's going to share now to actually give you some tools to use with your clients and for yourself for your own self-awareness. Okay? And
Thank you. All right, will you turn to the lights, because I also like bright.
I'll do it.
Okay, good idea. All right, hi. My name's Marlene, and you can see that from the front of your toolbox here. What is the title of that, Cheryl? Loudly. Resilience. No, what does the top of that say?
Oh, we can
do it. We can do it. Not me can do it. We can do it. Resilience is about the we. Okay, so I'm kind of speaking to those people, especially those clinical people that are involved here. All right, we can do it. All right, nobody does it on their own. Nobody does it on their own. All right, I am a very energized kind of person. All right, my mom used to tell me you never walked, Mommy. You crawled and you got up and ran and you never stopped. When I left Vermilion Hospital, what did they have on my cake? Do you remember? On the top of the cake? An Energizer bunny. Remember the Energizer bunny? All right, you know what I mean? It's true. All right, so it's like, I'm kind of like that. I got a lot of energy, and I like to put it out there, and I like to lift people up. All right, and I will say this to you. Resilience is a social factor. All right, what does that mean? That means that there is nobody here that was raised in the same family environment or had the same traumas as the people that they went through it with. We are all different. We are all different, all right? And that's why we need to be together to lift each other up, all right? Even in the same family. Siblings are born at different times, parents are different ways. How many people here are parents? You know, you might not love your children differently, but certainly they're different, all right? And each one of them is different because of the way they are, all right? You know, we're all different, all right? And that resilience is innate, all right? It's innate. It's not something that we build, all right? You know, we build on it, but it's in each of us. And one of the most important things that I think that Joy really went through several times was the idea that you need a mentor. You need someone in your life to see your light and say, hey, let's go on that. Okay. Do you know that about yourself? You know what I mean? Come talk to me about it. Do you know what I mean? What are your strengths? It's a strengths-based perspective. Do you know what I mean? It's the biggest thing that you can give anybody is to identify them in such a way as strengths, all right? And start to build with them, to be able to let them see it, because we all have them. And, you know, we might also have limitations, but it's very important for us to understand that our limitations are not as important as our strengths. Because you can work 1,000,000 years on your limitations and be half-assed, or you can work a million years on your strengths and be superb. All right, do you know? So it's like, what are your strengths? Where do you want to come from that? All right, where do you want to grow from that? Do you know what I mean? It really is true. I can remember working at Vermilion Hospital as the clinical director for them, and I am dyslexic, and I can spell the same word wrong 15 times in the same paragraph, even psychology. You know what I mean? It's like it just gets messed up. All right, and I can speak in front of a million people and not feel any anxiety whatsoever because it comes naturally to me. And I had a secretary, all right, Martha her name was, all right, and she used to take my words and she used to laugh and she used to put them all together and she would give them back to me and I'd say, who wrote this? She said, you did. You know, I just corrected the spelling. Yeah, oh great, yeah, that's great. And she would get hives when she went up to speak in front of her 3 people in her department. You know? It's like, so what are the strengths? And that's the critical kind of thing, you know, what are the strengths? We have to build with that, all right? And this little toolkit that I put together, I do a lot of work in recovery, all right, do you know what I mean? It's like, that used to be a me. The me has to turn to a we for you to be able to be bringing everybody up together, all right, without a doubt, all right? So we validate, we mirror it, we monitor, we have them see the light, we hone the incandescents that they are, all right, and that gives strength, and that is the social factor. You know, we are that, all right, and as therapists, as clinicians, as helpers, as neighbors, as whatever, that's what we're here for, that's what we're about, you know what I mean? It's like being that. It's not made, brought out, it's an innate thing. And I want to say something else, one of the traits of resilience that I like most is optimism. You know, being able to see the good side. You know, or being able to see the awareness of what's coming next. All right, I can remember my mom's 98 years old, all right, she's still kicking. All right, she's kicking me sometimes, most of the time, but she's pretty good, she's pretty strong, and she's gone under a lot of challenges, and she'll always say, Maureen, don't look at the doors that are closing, only look at the ones that are opening in front of you. And if you take a look at it, it's true. The only thing that you can count on, the only things you can count on consistency in terms of that is that things are going to change. All right, and you can spend a million years looking at, oh my God, you know, I lost that person, and we're all going to lose it. You know, all the things that are important to us are going to be non-existent at one time. All right, so can you look at the awareness of what's coming next, you know, what's in front of you? Because so many times you find people looking at those doors and beautiful things are opening in front of them and they can't even see them. You know what I mean? So what is our job? Help people understand that. You know, help people move to the next point. This doors open, doors close. That's the first one that's in your packet there. All right, and this is kind of like it just allows people to see an awareness, all right, of what's opening in front of them. All right, having them take a look at the door that closed. What was the incident or the occurrence in their life that closed? You know what I mean? And what is the new door that's opening in front of me? You know, to be able to look at that. What led to the door closing? What helped you? And there are a million things. You know, we talked a lot about death and loss, but there are jobs and God, you know, think of all the things that you went through. You know, I mean, I'm really fortunate that I just say I've had many lifetimes in one lifetime. You know, I just keep walking. You know, that's it. And right now, I'm kind of like I like to do a lot of international traveling. I like to travel a lot, and I haven't in the last couple of years a lot because Mom is 98. She needs me. I'm the one that's there. You know what I mean? But it's like when Mom decides to leave, well, I got another life out there ready to grab. You know what I mean? Without a doubt. Was it easy or hard for you to realize that the new door was open? You know, what prevented you from seeing? You know, goes through a whole bunch of little questions there, you know, that you can use these as worksheets with clients or with people, or with yourself. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be with clients and people. And then using the values to build resistance, you know, it talks about describe the challenging event, using the reasons to get through the challenge, identifying the values, staying in touch with values, all right. Talks a lot about vision boards in art. I think that we sometimes think that those are not great therapy tools, and they really are. Music is one of the biggest things that they say change all the hormones in the body. You know what I mean? It's like finding a music list that's great. And it's got a list of values on the back there, or you know what I mean, that helps people, you know, kind of look at that. 4 S's of resilience it talks about. And the next one, I'm just kind of going through these because you can read through these on your own. And I got 10 minutes left, all right? But it says supportive people in your life who are supportive for your changes, you know what I mean, your friends, you know what I mean, you got each other, you know what I mean, everybody's got a friend that they can go to, somebody, you know what I mean, it's important. I can remember when my daughter-in-law Maria came here, after my son had passed, you know what I mean, it's like she was from the Philippines, and her life changed dramatically, you know what I mean, it's like her socioeconomic class probably increased 100-fold, you know what I mean, and a year after that, she went back to the Philippines. And when she came home, I said to her, Maria, I was like kind of excited, you know, like I was excited about what she would say to her family and stuff. And I said, you know, did you talk to your father? And she said, yeah. She says, and did he ask you what it's like to live in America? And she said, yeah. So I said, what did you tell her? She says, I told her nobody knows their neighbors. Yeah, so my block became a commune, you know, it's like, and you're right. Everybody, because in the Philippines, you don't know anybody's first name, you just know their relationship, you know what I mean, it's really true. So identify strategies that you can get through, all right, identify your strengths, you know, what it is that you need, all right, and solution-seeking boundaries, all right? And then it kind of goes on, you know, and it talks about the resilience plan, all right? If you take the little boxes, or if you take a look at these things with the little boxes on it, that kind of talks about who are the supports, and it says past, present, future, and it gives you an example of it. What are the strategies? What are the sagacities? What are the solutions? All right, you know, it's like, just kind of write it all out, you know, I mean, it's a toolbox, you know, take a look at it, use it. And then the worksheet back there, all right, recognize the signs of your stress and stuff like that, building physical hardiness, you know, what are the things I can do to support my resilience plan at the very end there. If you take a look on those, all right, and it gets down to counter unhelpful thinking. And then I'm going to kind of end with this. All right, this is the knots prayer. All right, it says, Dear God, please untie the knots that are in my mind, my heart, and my life. Remove the have-nots, the can-nots, and the do-nots that I have in my mind. Erase the will-nots, may-nots, might-nots that I find a home in my heart. Release me from the could-nots, would-nots, should-nots that obstruct my life. Most of all, dear God, I ask you to remove from my mind, my heart, and my life, all the am-nots that I have allowed to hold me back, especially the thought that I am not good enough. You're all resilient, you all have it in you. Share it with others, it builds your resilience when you share it. Raise up together. Amen. Thank you.
All right.